For me, it comes down to having a very well articulated what and why, and then a degree of flexibility in the how. Because in our world, we have the overall SPG central culture, which is, to your point, very well defined, and it's part of the onboarding, and there's welcome videos, and there's things that people learn about what it means to be on Team SPG. But then at the practice, there's its own microculture, and then my favorite definition of culture is not a shared set of beliefs, but a shared set of actions.
Hey there, Dental Economist. If you're a dentist owner or a leader within a dental business thinking about growing production, case acceptance, patient and staff satisfaction, positive outcomes, and everything else that comes with running a dental business, then you're a dental economist, and you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Dental Economist Show. We're meeting at the intersection of profit and purpose as I sit down with dental leaders who share their stories about dentistry, business, and growth. Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Before we get started, if you enjoy the show, if you could like it, leave a review, subscribe wherever you consume your podcasts, really helps us deliver more great content to dental professionals across the country. Today, I am very excited to welcome Dr. Alex Sharp. Dr. Sharp is the CEO and co-founder of Shared Practices Group, a pioneering remote dental support organization that, interestingly enough, originated from a podcast. With a passion for mentorship and clinical excellence, Dr. Sharp has led SPG's growth to 38 locations nationwide, specializing in dental and implant care. A visionary leader, advocate for leveraging technology and collaboration, Dr. Sharp is reshaping the dental industry by creating opportunities for young dentists and promoting a culture of continuous improvement. He is also the host of the SPG podcast and a contributor to the Full Arch podcast, where he shares insights on clinical practice and organizational leadership. Dr. Sharp, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I got to live up to that intro. And I'll tell you, your podcast is one of my favorites because I feel like there's more education happening per minute of the episode than any other dental podcast. I just feel like there's a lot of note-taking that happens whenever I listen to you and your guests. So I think it's like guest selection. I think it's great interview questions. So I'll try not to let the listenership down today. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words. And to get started, let's just kind of take a step back a little bit. I think some folks that are listening to the podcast today will be like, where did Shared Practices Group come from? Like, it feels like almost like an overnight success. But we know that rarely exists, where things just kind of pop up overnight. And from your perspective, you've been working on this for quite some time. So can you kind of share a little bit about your journey, both like how you got into dentistry to start, and then what the impetus was for starting and founding this group?
Yeah, so like most overnight successes, it's been 10 years in the making. I think that's a truism that applies across the board. And, I started in dentistry for a lot of the same reasons that most dentists get into it, is that it's a stable field, it's a good job, you got some autonomy, you're able to help people, you're able to make a difference for folks. And also, like a lot of people, I got out of school and I realized that, oh my gosh, there's almost a suffocating amount of options. Like, the irony is that there's so many different ways to go that you could be paralyzed by saying, like, do I work at a corporation? Do I work as an associate in private practice? Do I sprint and go buy a practice for myself? What's the right move here? Do I go back and specialize? And I feel like you find something to latch onto. I did a lot of dental town research back in the day. And one of the first things that I did after graduation was I went to the Voices of Dentistry conference, the very first one in 2017, a couple of years after graduation. And I met Richard Lowe, who was one of my co-founders at SB and SPG. And I became friends with Richard. And then my other fellow co-founders, George Hariri, Matt Garino, Matt Ford, and Austin Davis, we all contributed to the SP podcast from its primordial times back in like 2017 or so. And then eventually we built a network of doctors, a Facebook group. We built an education arm, a coaching company. And that was how we helped dentists get the most out of their careers, generally from a practice management standpoint, and then also just from like a business acumen perspective. That's how it got started. And then we had enough dentists in our ethos that were demanding, like, hey, we have all of this pent up potential energy. What can we do together? What can we do in terms of making a real splash in the industry. Basically, we were a network in search of a platform. And that's where SPG Shared Practices Group was built around the philosophy of, if we're going to carve out a niche in the dental space, what is a largely unmet or underserved need for patients? And then from there, you can reverse engineer an offering that's compelling for dentists. And that's what we did. And that's, like you said in the intro, that's how we've predicated so much of our growth and development on the denture and implant model, because what we find is that in the marketplace, and you could choose dentistry, you could look at menswear, men's shoes, or anything else, and you could say, hey, there's this bifurcation in the market happening. There's not this gradient, there's not this bell curve. It's a bifurcation where either you're buying shoes on Amazon or you're buying bespoke handmade shoes. There's really no middle ground. The middle ground is Kmart, the middle ground is Sears, all that's gotten competed away. You're either buying shoes at a big box retailer for relatively inexpensively, or you're getting bespoke handmade shoes and you value the level of service and the convenience and the quality ahead of the price. The price is worth it to you. And so in dentistry, we see the same kind of phenomenon happening where the middle, the former meat of the bell curve, is getting competed away, where instead of just being a garden variety PPO practice, it's hard to exist doing that because we all know the pricing pressures on dentistry. We all know the challenge of hiring your team, paying your team, having ever more diminutive insurance reimbursements. And so then you're faced with, okay, I'm going to be either high volume, all PPOs, all Medicaid, all things to all people. You're going to be a mile wide and an inch deep, or you can lay down the gauntlet and say, hey, I'm going to be excellent at this relatively narrow focus. I'm going to go very deep in my pursuit of mastery as a clinician, which then allows me to render an ever higher degree of service to my patients. And it's hard to do that for most of us unless we consciously narrow our scope. And in our case, that's dentures and implants. There's a lot of people that are coming out of school and seeing the value of doing this type of care for people. And the thing I'll say in closing is that, as a dentist, for all the years that I've been a dentist, there's nothing more disempowering than doing a quadrant of fillings and hoping that the patient doesn't know what you did. Like that kind of stinks to be getting paid. And then a successful outcome is the patient doesn't notice that you stealthily went in and removed the decay and put fillings in there and nothing hurts when they floss or chew or eat something cold. You're hoping that they don't notice your impact. Whereas with what we do, patients are banking on getting a visible, measurable, visceral impact, which is way more fun as a dentist to provide.
Yeah, absolutely. I talked to my wife sometimes a couple of years ago. Well, I talked about her quite a bit, actually. But we did a lot of different remodeling on our home. And the one that was my least favorite portion was redoing our roof. And the reason is in Phoenix, all they do is they pick all the tiles up and then they redo everything underneath, and then they put all the tiles back. You spend this enormous amount of money, and then you can see no difference. Nobody walks by and goes, hey, what an amazing job that you did on that roof. You're just like, no, I just have less money now, and the roof apparently doesn't leak. So it's really disappointing. So I can understand wanting to make that impact. You said earlier that you were a network seeking a platform, and you kind of created this community first, which is, I don't think, the typical way that most groups and organizations become formed. What were some of the challenges in that approach that made it maybe more difficult than it would have been if you took the traditional path?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really astute question. I think the benefit was that we were able to reach nationwide scale fairly quickly. Like we are geographically agnostic largely. We're 38 locations in 23 states. So we grew with that forcing function of, hey, we're going to have to figure out this remote workflow, this way of managing performance remotely, the ways of driving consistency and in the adoption of all of our norms and all of our systems. So it made us really good in that regard. But then the challenge is not every single provider, not every single clinician gets into full arch dentistry after having done the CE, after having done the residency programs, after having done a lot of surgery. Not everyone decides that that's what they want to do with their careers. For the right people, it's the best thing ever. The old adage is that the worst day fishing is better than the best day at the office, for example. When you found your niche, when you found the right seat for you in your chosen career path, you can deal with the rainy days. Because the sunny days are amazing, like they're the best thing ever. You do it for free. But on the rainy days, are you happy with your chosen career choice? And so finding the right doctors that truly are called, for lack of a better term, to do this type of dentistry, that's been a journey to make sure that every single person that's coming into the company has made that conscious decision to say like, hey, I'm cool putting down the fillings. I'm cool putting down the root canals. I want to just say, hey, for now and forever, this is my calling. This is what I want to do. Full arch surgery, full arch implantology.
Now, you just mentioned finding the right doctors, and I've heard you speak before about the importance of ensuring that you're partnering with the right individuals. And you speak about humility, and you talk about screening doctors for humility. From your perspective now, after having many conversations with many doctors, what are some of the telltale either cues, body language, or otherwise that immediately raise a red flag for you?
Yeah, I mean, our hiring process and our screening process and our onboarding process has gotten lengthier and lengthier and lengthier over time. And one of the checkpoints is what I call the core value meeting, where we've qualified the candidate on paper. They have the requisite skill set and experience. We have other internal ways of measuring diagnostic acumen and treatment planning and making sure that there's a philosophical alignment with what we do. But then the final boss, I guess, in video game terms that you have to conquer is me, so that we have every new doctor I talk with, and I ask a series of questions to assess exactly what you're saying. If we're talking about a challenging time in dentistry, if we're talking about a challenging case or something that happened that didn't go according to plan, narrate that for me. Paint me a picture. What happened? What was your initial assessment of the situation, and what did you do? And by asking that type of open-ended question, you're able to gauge, is this a person that points the blame elsewhere, or is this a person that has a strong sense of ownership, one of our core values? And I'm able to assess by asking those types of open-ended questions, what is this person's internal operating system like? Abundance mindset or scarcity mindset? Strong sense of ownership or abdicating leadership? What is it? Because you can have all of the bona fides in the world on a resume, but if the person doesn't have the right personality, the right coachability, the right growth potential, the right way of understanding that everybody contributes to the success of the team, and that the level 4 leadership, the genius with 1,000 helpers, doesn't have a place in our company. Like, you have to be able to collaborate and approach your role as 1 + 1 = 3, rather than everyone should report to you and be at your beck and call. So dentists are notorious. I can say that because I'm a dentist. So like, dentists are a weird breed where we develop the God complex, right? And I've heard the joke, and this is a little denigrating, but it was said in jest. But what's the difference between God and a dentist?
I don't know.
God knows he's not a dentist.
There we go.
Right. So yeah. So you have to, you grapple with that sometimes. The I can do, you have to be confident, obviously, but at the same time, you have to be humble. And so that's a tough line to toe. And you just have to, if you're listening to this and you're a leader in a DSO, or you're scaling beyond the single site in dentistry, you have to find your own way of screening for those qualities that you know to be commensurate with what you're trying to build.
So you ask these open-ended questions, which I think are really great ways at getting a better understanding of how people approach things. And you talked about accountability and ownership, which lends itself towards, hey, here was the part that I played in that experience. Here's, holding up a mirror. Where did I have the opportunity to be better? In an interview process, if you were giving somebody advice, is there ever an appropriate time to surface or highlight complaints about past experiences? Or does it always read as a negative, where you're saying this individual is pointing out things that were outside of their control as contributing factors to either their success or lack of it in the past?
I think you could make an argument on either side of that. And I think what I would say is that at the end of the day, I'm screening for self-awareness. So like, whether we're wanting to take extreme ownership, or whether we're wanting to be aware of the non-controllables, at the end of the day, just being able to, even on a high level intellectually, look at the past, make an assessment of the past relative to right now, and then derive or extrapolate or interpolate some lessons from that. I think that's ultimately a sign of coachability. That's a sign of malleability. That's a sign of being able to question prior, I guess you could say, sacred cows, and then learn and iterate and improve, because life seldom rewards being like stolidly in your corner and unwilling to receive new information and modify the behavior. Like, every successful person that I'm aware of is curious, is insatiable, and wants to learn the better way, and is able to subserviate the ego to the point of saying like, hey, if there's a better way to do it, then no sweat off my back. I would love to know the better way to do it. And I don't have an ego about it. Those are the people that I want to go into battle with.
Now, for those that are unaware, share your approach to de novos versus acquisition, how you think about them, why you made the decisions that you did, about how you were going to grow the business when you first launched.
It's funny because if you would have asked me this question 4 or 5 years ago, I would have a 180-degree diametrically opposed answer to the question. And I love acquisitions for a lot of reasons, because there's a lot of benefits that accrue to having a stable corpus of patients. You have the recurring revenue, you have the team, you have the Google presence, you have the old hardwired habits of all your patients going to that location. Even if you're rewiring it or if you're stripping it down to the studs, there is like this inborn DNA of the practice that you're inheriting that you can then bolt on to your larger whole. And that was the process that I started back in the day in Arkansas. Like I was moving in that direction, and then fate intervened. And I think when you're thinking about doing a de novo or doing an acquisition, it really depends on your overarching strategy. Because if I'm an aspiring multi-site maven, locally in an area, a lot of times it makes more sense to do the acquisitions because there's proof of concept, there's prior production history, there's prior tax returns. Lenders can get their arms around the existing book of business of a practice, and there's not as much blue sky and there's not as much dice rolling. But when you do a de novo, if you're doing something drastically different, then a lot of times it makes sense to just start from square one. But your knowledge base, your demographic studies, all of the quantitative assessments have to be airtight on the front end to be able to justify doing the de novo. So if you've done a bunch of the pre-work and you have a clear vision of what you're building and you have a defensible business model that's well differentiated from competition, then you can do de novos. I think that if you're wanting to grow your footprint, I think the predictability for most of us is acquisitions. The challenge is obviously interest rates are higher. Competition for amazing acquisitions is higher than ever because there's more people in the acquisition game that are already exceptional at it. And with acquisitions, it's not all that different from, say, you do single family real estate. Single family real estate, a lot of times you make your money on the front end where it's what you get the deal for. Is it an off-market deal? Has it been on the MLS? Have other people passed it over? So it's all about finding the diamond in the rough, and then those are the best acquisitions. So it's competitive to do acquisitions, but it's also, I would say, kind of a lower risk, lower reward kind of scenario, whereas de novos can be higher risk, but then if done well, higher reward.
And for SP, you had roughly 6 partners in total, all with existing practices. Is that correct? And then you did some acquisitions, but then you kind of accelerated the growth with de novos and creating new practices. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so we basically merged our existing locations together under one umbrella. And then bit by bit, we started divesting of certain of those practices over time to fuel the future de novo growth. And we still have 2 GP locations that are strong, that are a good part of our platform. But yeah, I mean, everything new since 2022 has been denture and implant de novo, largely because that's what the demand is for. Like, the doctors want to do that. We feel like if we have the discipline to narrow our focus, then that fuels our constant improvement in our understanding of our model. We consciously restrict, we put the horse blinders on and we say, okay, we're going to avoid bright, shiny object syndrome. Even if a good acquisition opportunity comes across our desk, that's just not our zone right now. And we're just focusing on getting really excellent because we feel like in our world, there's so many doctors that want to work with us. There's so many great opportunities. We've learned so much over time. Our understanding of demographics is such that we feel like we can be a credit to doctors that want to work with us.
So let's say there is a 5-location group that comes across your desk that is like maybe by all accounts, like almost a perfect target, culture match. All of the numbers look great. The business is solid. What are the things that would still make you walk away from that and continue on the path that you're on? You talked about the shiny object piece, and let's say this is the shiniest of objects. Is it still something where like you would consider it, or are you all kind of aligned at this point and so disciplined that it's not even worth a look?
The way I would answer that is I would say I would have to run the numbers on what the adjacent possible would look like. So for example, I would take the purchase price of that 5 location group, and then I would do equal and opposite math of how many locations could we get off the ground for that amount of investment into that group. And then also what would be the anticipated EBITDA on what we would, based upon prior performance, be looking at for the new locations over here that would be yet to be built, because that'd be the math on my side, is just looking at the different parallel approaches when you're allocating capital to do acquisitions versus de novos. And I think, like, for us, our whole company is oriented towards all of the different vertically integrated elements that are required to be able to select the markets, do all of the doing to prep the locations. That's kind of our secret sauce at this point, is like being able to do that predictably and in the right location, which has taken us years to be able to nail. So I think we're definitely a de novo based platform for the foreseeable future. Never say never. But for right now, we have so much blue sky in that regard that we're just going to keep our heads down and keep performing there.
So when you run that analysis and you kind of do the comparison and you're looking at, potential EBITDA, and then you run it against the models that you have with clearly successful outcomes and the ability to do this, how much of human capital plays a part in that analysis and the ability to hire and staff de novo practices at this point? Is that still a challenge? You hear a lot in the industry about the labor market concerns. How do you overcome that?
I mean, human capital is everything. In dentistry, if someone doesn't want to be in the service industry, they should not go into dentistry. So you have to go in eyes wide open, knowing that if we were equipping a restaurant or we were equipping any type of other service-oriented business, human capital remains the thing, to the problem to solve, the fire to put out. And so you're absolutely right. Like, some markets, the hiring is easy. You snap your finger and then you found your front office team, or you found your clinical team. And what we've done, because of our remote nature, and we've seen the good, the bad, the ugly in terms of the differences in hiring markets, you just have to be really good at training people, frankly, when you're thinking about what is my ideal avatar for this type of role, and then you recruit against that avatar. And then what's my onboarding look like? What are my touch points centrally with that person? What's my video library look like? How much sophistication am I approaching the structured nature, the curated nature of that person's on-ramp to the company? And then once they're in the company, what does performance management look like? How much feedback are they getting on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And then, are they clear on what success looks like? Do they know if they're on track or off track? Those are all things that in a single site, in a perfect world, you're doing anyway. But the onus is really on you when you don't have your tentacles, I guess, in close proximity with each location. If you're spread out, even if you're in a region, even if you're like a DSO based in the Pacific Northwest, for example, if you're across multiple counties or even in one state, you still have to have visibility somehow into what's going on. And I really feel like that to be able to recruit, onboard, manage performance of, and then ultimately retain people, it starts with having visibility into what they're doing. That's kind of a prerequisite that I think about. But no, I think being able to hire coachable people, have a defensible value proposition that someone that joins your team would be able to be excited about and be compelled to want to buy into, then that's the thing. That's what you're dealing with. And I think from an employer's perspective, what's different about what you're offering? Because yeah, you have salary, yeah, you have hourly pay, yeah, you have benefits, but then what does the actual day feel like? Like, that matters too. And I think that gets glossed over, because the actual experience of the day, a Medicaid mill, feels way different than it might in like a boutique Invisalign practice, or it's a dental assistant will figure that out. Like, dental assistants that are savvy, that are worth their salt, they've probably tried different types of dentistry, and they're going to go to the one that probably makes them the least hating the world at the end of the day, So people vote with their feet. So your retention is a measure of how well you value your human capital.
With a de novo model, you have to retain a higher level of control over what culture is like within each practice. You can really set the tone and define what that is. How would you explain that for SPG? If somebody said, what is the culture like in your practices? What do you focus on? What do you lead with? What are you telling them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it comes down to having a very well articulated what and why, and then a degree of flexibility in the how. Because in our world, we have the overall SPG central culture, which is, to your point, very well defined, and it's part of the onboarding, and there's welcome videos and there's things that people learn about what it means to be on Team SPG. But then at the practice, there's its own microculture. And then my favorite definition of culture is not a shared set of beliefs, but a shared set of actions. So obviously you have to have the underpinning of the beliefs and the social mores and the norms to be able to instantiate the actions that you want. So you have to have all of those things nailed down, like the posters on the walls and everything in the newsletters, like all of those things matter. But then ultimately rubber meets the road. Do we act similarly across locations? Do we share that commitment? What does that look like? And I think that you have to have some degree of tolerance for, like I said, microcultures. I think that's a helpful framing, is that you have the overall arc of what you're shooting for. And like, hey, a patient comes in with this type of need or this type of objective or this type of objection. Will the patient experience be similar in Spokane, Washington, as it is in Sarasota, Florida? That's the goal. That is the measure of success for me, is that you take someone and you plug them into each location. Are we getting a similar outcome for that patient? Like that's what we're working toward.
Yeah, I like the focus on actions. We here at Plant 2DS, we really focus on our core values, and the way that I try to frame it is it's the lens within which you make your decisions on how you should act. And so it's not just a belief system. It should have impact on behavior ultimately for it to end up being effective. When you talk about the microcultures, I think that's a great way of thinking about it. What are some of the variances? Like, what would you expect to be different between offices? Like having that flexibility and allowing there to be some autonomy in a sense, where recognizing maybe different locations are going to be slightly different. What are some of the things that are acceptable, allowable, or maybe even encouraged?
I think the big one for me is doctor preferences, right? Because the way I think about it, our org chart's kind of like the upside down pyramid, where I view all of my doctors to be my boss. Because if the doctors aren't deriving value from being a part of our platform, then we have no platform. So I like the doctors to be able to, within the guardrails of the structure that we provide, put their own stamp on the practice. Like, hey, here's what we like to do to celebrate for lunch at the end of every month after we hit goal, or we're going to do 9 to 6 hours instead of 8 to 5. This is how we do the Google reviews with our patients, or this is how we celebrate creating a raving fan at our practices. Like, there's just a lot of latitude around what it feels like to be in the practice, the music choices. Like, there's certain things that you want to be standardized as a company. Any type of multi-site anything, you have to have some degree of concrete standards. But then on the stuff that's like the actual experience of being in the practice every day, the doctors have to be able to thrive and feel like they have their fingerprints on things. And so it's definitely a delicate balance, but understand that if a dental assistant in one location were to be teleported into another location, there'd be a lot of similarities and a lot of parallels, but at the same time, it'd be a little different. It'd be like the same song in a different key.
Now, you have a kind of remote support organization. You talked about somebody teleporting from one to the other. Are there regional managers? What does your support structure look like? And how do you maintain it and kind of retain the culture while being a distributed organization?
I think the secret to that is honestly structuring that central support in a way that promotes the practice teams to be able to focus on what only they can focus on. It's kind of like in the single site, where if the dentist is doing everything, the micromanagerial type of dentist that answers the phone and schedules the next appointment and collects the money and makes the temporary crowns and takes the x-rays themselves, it's tough to be a team member in that environment, because you're like, okay, I don't have the autonomy to do what I can do at the top of my own certification, because the dentist isn't performing at the top of his or her own certification. It's the same with the central team. If there's an element of nannying going on at the central team, then the practice teams don't have the ability to flourish. So again, back to the delicate balance. But for us, the approach has always been, if there's a way to in-house it, if there's a way to add it into our vertically integrated stack, then that's what we want to do. And that pertains to remote management, that pertains to team training, that pertains to sales and finance and marketing and doctor development. I mean, we in-house as much as we can in-house. And I feel like that allows us to be further differentiated, because if you're doing de novos, then you have to have your way, air quotes, the SPG way, really nailed down and really clarified. Playbooks, structure, guidelines, all of that matters, because if you're acquiring a practice, then the game is different. Then the game is, what are we forcing the new acquisition to do? Like, what are the things that they have to be comfortable with modifying, changing, and towing the company line about, versus, hey, if we insist on too many changes too quickly, then we alienate the seller, then we burn our goodwill, and then what do we just pay for? Versus de novos, it's just the expectation, it's the structure, it's the rules of the road.
Yeah, everything becomes change management in the acquisition model versus just installing a way of doing things, and kind of two completely different motions and challenges. You're of course familiar with general dentistry. You have a couple offices that you've mentioned that are part of your organization. What are some of the unique challenges that you face with an implant and dentures business, either from a patient acquisition perspective or retention? I mean, the business model with that specialty is significantly different than what a general dentistry business model is. If somebody is interested, say they have a DSO already, 5 or 8 offices, and they're like, hey, maybe we're going to open up an office for implants and dentures, what are some of the things that they should consider before doing?
It's tough to dabble. That's what I would say, is that if you're thinking about dentures and implants as an offshoot or as a bolt-on or as something to add to an existing platform that already is emblematic of a zone of genius or a zone of excellence, there's so much nuance to doing this type of model. And it starts with what I would call the funnel. Like, patient attraction is so much of the equation. Because when you're starting practices, if you're starting practices, you have to have a pretty well-defined way of getting patients to come in to see you. And so lead gen is everything. Phones are everything. Being able to convert that interested party into a person that arrives at your office with a problem that's the right type of problem that you're poised to solve. All of those elements of the funnel are things that have to be figured out and that are largely unique to this model. Because yeah, you can have referrals. Referrals to me are, in our world, icing on the cake. Referrals are great when you can get them. I just don't find that they're predictable or scalable across geographies, because some of our practices get lots of referrals and then they reciprocate. When you have people come in that maybe think they need all their teeth out, but they don't, they really just need like periodontal therapy and they need a few fillings, like we send them to a general dental partner, and then there's reciprocity there. But I think it's really just understanding that there's not the recurring revenue in this type of model that there is in GP. And so you just have to have a really well-built, well-oiled marketing engine. And the marketing is only the first part. The other part is, how good are you on the phones? And that's the piece of advice that I would give to every single dentist, every single practice owner, either current or aspiring. You're never as good on the phones as you think you are. Put that on a bumper sticker. I learned that a long time ago the hard way, because when you actually roll the game film and you're listening in on those calls and you think, okay, I've trained on this, and they know to do this, and if there's this kind of objection, we know how to reroute around it like this. Listen to the game film. That's the truth.
You cringe a little bit sometimes, huh?
Oh, yeah.
You listen to this conversation, like, ooh, that's not what we were looking for there.
Yeah, for sure. You have to learn the hard way, and you have to have the discipline to actually use that voice over IP technology and listen in and offer feedback, offer guidance on stuff. Because, I mean, if I were to teleport into one of our practices right now and answer a phone, as much training as I've done on it and as many conversations like that as I've had, you could pick apart some stuff because you're thinking on your feet, you're thinking on the fly. You have these ways to answer these questions and guide the conversation, but no one's perfect. So we can always improve.
Yeah, it kind of ties back the don't dabble piece to the going deep versus wide, and appreciate the kind of focus on just becoming great at what you do. There's a lot of value there. To continue with the phone conversation, from a technology perspective, there's a lot of different tools out in the marketplace now. You're hearing about AI phone solutions, AI receptionists, this, that, and the other thing. Do you place a lot of stock in that? Do you hope that at some point it will have the value, or the value will reach the level of the expectations that are currently being set? Where do you see all of that going? Have you been kind of following that closely?
Yeah, I've been tracking it pretty closely. I don't know if I have all the latest and greatest, because I feel like things change every single day nowadays. But I do think it's an eventuality that that technology will be able to, if not augment, if not replace, at least be an additional tool to your existing human capital. Because I know some dental offices are experimenting with the check-in kiosk rather than being warmly checked in by an actual person. I think it depends on your demographic as to whether that'll be looked upon favorably or not. I think it depends on the type of procedures that you do. I think it depends on your level of competition because the way that you leverage all of this technology, to me, should run downstream from whatever you want to choose as your zone of genius, to go back to that phrase. Because as a dentist, as a company, you want to be differentiated. Because if you're generic, if you're interchangeable, you will get outcompeted. There has to be something that you boldly say, this is what we do. And then all of these decisions about what to automate, what to keep in house, what to outsource should run downstream from what your distinction is in the marketplace. And I think for a lot of us, if you look at the trends, most dentists are general dentists. Most dentists have a similar GP bread and butter procedure mix with some hygiene mixed in. And so I think for that type of practice, I think there's a lot of utility in leveraging a lot of the AI new developments in technology. And we use some, like internally, we use AI for a good bit of stuff. And I'm sure that the numbers of things that we'll continue to use it for will grow over time. But if you're thinking about the average practice that's single site, I think there will be a time when it makes sense to have the AI answering the phone or the AI checking someone in or the AI making follow-up calls or reactivation calls or what have you. But I think we have to be careful because if you do the behaviors of the type of distinction that you don't want to have in the marketplace, then patients are going to oversimplify and say, oh, well, they must see 300 new patients a month and I don't want to be a number. I want the human connection. So if you think you're a boutique and you think you're going to be high touch and you think that you want to charge full fee, be out of network, then the human connection, I think, will persist longer. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's probably how it's going to go versus if you automate everything and the patients perceive that there's just a lot of automated stuff going on. Just a guess.
And when you were mentioning the check-in kiosks and you said, well, it probably depends on your demographics, immediately in my head, I was like, well, maybe the assumption is that the younger generations will be more agreeable to a check-in kiosk. And then in my head, I said, I immediately feel old because I would much rather have the warm welcome of a human and saying, hey, like you're about to undergo some things and we're happy to have you here. Welcome, like have a seat. We'll take care of you versus the cold screen of just check in and go from there. But it'll be interesting to see for sure how it progresses over time. What are some of the other technological advancements that you're excited about? It can be clinical, it could be anything really. When you're just looking at the industry as a whole and your specific focus on dentures and implants, are there things that are exciting today?
I think that there's a lot in the realm of visibility into workflows because we've leveraged different workflow management tools. Obviously, the cloud types of managing your IT needs is something we're getting into. The ability to remote in and support and work with doctors on saying like, hey, planning cases and reviewing cases. I just think that there's a lot of benefits to the technological advancements that would have made doing any type of multi-site healthcare, especially dentistry, it would have been really challenging pre-digital x-rays, pre-cone beam CTs. So I'm thankful that we're in the time that we are because doing any type of multi-site healthcare would have been a real challenge without the ability to have that visibility into the way things are at the practices. And yeah, I just think about how the visibility is everything. That's what I keep coming back to. And that's the biggest piece of advice that I would give is whatever you do, whatever technology that you add, be it just remoting into your practice management system, seeing what the schedule looks like, seeing what the AR is, seeing how the consults and the different procedures are scheduled and just doing your auditing and your CYA on things. I think that's really important is to promote visibility and user friendliness, to be able to keep a sense of how things are going and to make sure that you empower your teams to leverage that technology, use checklists. These are all things that I think are multi-site fundamentals.
Now, I'm getting a little over my skis here. I don't really understand exactly how this all works, but I had heard somebody speak about 3D printing of dentures. Is that a technology that you're actively using or pursuing? Is there a lot of promise there? Can you maybe share a little bit about exactly what it is.
Yeah, we've done that in several of our locations. It's not the standard across the board yet, but some of our more tech forward doctors have the 3D printing set up to be able to do the removables. I think there's long been a lot of well accepted workflows to 3D print some of the provisional teeth, the temporary teeth, the healing teeth in like phase one of an implant procedure. But then the actual 3D printing of dentures, yeah, it's coming a long way. It's not everyone's cup of tea. Some people still prefer the good old fashioned pressure pot analog method, pros and cons, but it's definitely made a big leap since they first burst onto the scene a few years ago. And I think that's another decision point is, okay, there's still a lot of economic viability to outsourcing all your lab stuff. So you have to think, okay, do I want to buy the printer, buy the scanner, buy all the resin and do all the things and allocate the chair time to figuring this out? Or do I want to click a button and send a lab slip to an external lab? That's a stylistic decision that you want to make sure is in keeping with whatever your differentiation is. Because if you want to be the tech forward, high end, we do it all in house, then yeah, there might be benefits to doing the 3D printed method. But if you don't have that differentiation in mind, then maybe it makes sense to continue farming out your lab work to an external lab. There's no right answer. I think it just is the context of what you're aiming for.
I want to go back to the discussion about opening up a new practice and building out the funnel, the importance of marketing. When you're going to launch a new practice and open, what are the expectations? Like, how do you know that you're ready? How far ahead of opening the doors to a new practice do you put in motion the machine in an attempt to attract new patients and get the name out there that, hey, we're about to be here in your market? And are schedules normally filled right from the outset? Is there a ramp up time? I'm just kind of curious as to like what the expectations are for what success looks like when you're first launching one of these new offices.
Yeah, so marketing is definitely a big component, but every component of the new location is on a countdown clock. So think about 10, 9, 8. It's like a big NASA countdown clock starting with -6 months. So 6 months before opening, there's stuff to do. Then 5 months before opening, there's stuff to do. 4 months, 3 months, 2 months. Stuff really picks up at 1 month. Marketing engine and the multifactorial omni-channel approach that we use generally starts about, month, maybe a little more ahead. And then, yeah, you have consultations day one. And part of it is you can't outcompete a bad market. That sounds trite and obvious, but you could have the best team and the best processes and the best doctor in the world. But if you choose wrong on your market in a de novo, you can't overcome that. I don't care how parallel your implants are. I don't care, how painless your injections are. You can't outcompete a bad market. And so market selection, being clear on your criteria. And that's what I meant. I meant like high risk, high reward. Part of the high risk is you could totally whiff on the location. We've had to learn some things the hard way, frankly, to be able to inform our current knowledge base of how to select markets. And so, we've nailed that. But if you're thinking about doing de novos, do your homework. If you're thinking like, hey, I'm going to acquire a practice that has the proof of concept to have patient base and the demand already hardwired, that's a lower risk way of growing your platform because there's already proof, there's already defensibility of that location.
What are some of the mistakes that you've made in the building of this business over the past decade?
Let's see. I don't know how many more hours you have. If we were on tape, I would say flip to the new tape. Human capital is a big one, like we talked about earlier. Just getting clear on the types of folks, and a lot of it back to the whole like if you're pointing the finger, three fingers are pointing back at you. I've learned a lot about how to put people in positions to succeed, and I think back over the years of like, okay, well, this relationship didn't go great, or the value wasn't harvested the way that this person wanted to harvest value by virtue of working with the company. And I just think that you have to always consider what is your role in those miscues or those whiffs when you have a fastball right down the middle and you whiff. Why'd you whiff? Were you focused on the wrong thing? Were you focused on the fastball? And so I think for me, it's understanding that the people part of the business, you can't divorce the people part of the business from the success that you hope to have in the business. And so even for those of us that crunch numbers and are spreadsheet focused, you have the economic capital that you're concerned about, but then the human capital is inextricably linked to the realization of the economic capital that you're shooting for.
So I know that a culture of continuous learning is really important for you. what does your personal continuous learning journey look like?
Well, I think I try to learn from people that know more than me, which luckily there's a lot of those out there. And I try to listen to podcasts like yours. I try to listen to people that have gone where I'm trying to go. In-person learning, I think it's hard to replicate. So going to CE events, networking, and really just for me, it's finding folks that have achieved the types of measurable success in business that I'm trying to do. And then the other way to learn is I love doing site visits. I love going to all of our practices and talking to the team and learning what their experience is like. That's very direct, applicable learning is to go on site and just what does it sound like? What does it smell like? What am I hearing? What are the conversations that are being had? How seamlessly are people accepting care? What are the things that the team is up against that maybe would be imperceptible looking at a computer screen that you have to be on site to really appreciate? That's my favorite type of business learning is just being in one of our practices and seeing how are things working.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of headwinds in dental overall. There's a lot of, there's inflation, there's cost pressures, there's labor challenges. What are the things that make you the most bullish about this space?
Oh gosh, the demand. Like there's just so much unmet demand. I always tell people that we have two cohorts of people that really benefit from the care that we provide. Number one is the ever-growing edentulous population. And then number two is the hard to quantify, but extremely important dentally disenfranchised population. People that haven't had access to care. They don't have the knowledge base to understand that they need care. They don't understand that these longstanding infections that they have contribute to systemic consequences that they've been spinning their wheels trying to fix with their primary care provider. I mean, that's the demand is not going away. Lifestyles aren't getting healthier. It's the great irony of our time is that information's never been more readily available, but the desire to act upon that information has also been lower than ever. So weird paradox that we find ourselves in, but the demand for dentistry is not going anywhere.
Very well said. Dr. Sharp, thank you so much for joining. Really, really appreciate the conversation. It's fascinating what you guys are doing and very impressive what you guys have built.
Well, Mike, thank you for having me. And, if anybody wants to get in touch or ask questions, alex@sharedpractices.com is my email address. And I love what I do. I love being able to give back to the community. And I just appreciate the platform, Mike, and good luck to you and your future endeavors.
Yeah, thank you so much. The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS, home of Dental OS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for listening.